What's up, gang? Now that you've completed module number 3 of the Fat to Fit Coach Foundations of Nutrition course and know how to calculate your macros, I want to talk to you about tracking your macros. In module number 4, you're going to learn how to track your macros, what the best way to track your macros is, and at the end of the day, what tracking your macros is really going to do for you. To start, I want you guys to think of your macros just like a financial budget, okay? So your daily calories are basically the daily amount of money you can spend, however much that is, right? Whether it's $100, whether it's $200, whether it's 2,000 calories or 2,500 calories, okay? That's your daily budget. Now, your protein, carbs, and fats are gonna be just like your categories within your budget. So you have groceries allotted for the day, you have a certain amount of money you can spend on entertainment for the day. And that's gonna be just like your protein, carbs, and fats, okay? So you have a certain amount of protein, a certain amount of carbs, and a certain amount of fats, and those make up your total calories. And just like our financial budget, we can't go over that number. It's not the end of the world if we go under that number. Just like a financial budget, it's probably okay to maybe one day you just, hey, I'm not gonna go watch a $5 movie today. And you save some money, and that's perfectly okay. It's the same idea with our calories. If you don't hit your macros, that's fine. Now, with that said, we do want to make sure that we're hitting our protein, because if you remember back to module number 2, protein is our most important macronutrient, okay? It's going to keep us full, it's going to build muscle, and we really want to make sure that if there's any macro that we're making sure we're hitting each day, it's that protein number. If you're thinking about your macros and your calories just like your daily food budget, when you go make decisions about what you're gonna eat, what kinds of foods you're gonna eat, you're gonna wanna know what kinds of macros are in those foods, right? And to know that, you're just gonna turn that food over and read that food label. It'll tell you the proteins, the carbs, the fats, and show you the calories. Now, if maybe the food doesn't have a food label, what are you gonna do? Well, part of tracking your macros, one of the ways you can do it is in an app, an online food diary, okay, such as MyFitnessPal. When you go into those apps, they're all user generated and you can find millions of entries. So let's say you went to a restaurant and you got pizza. You could just search pizza, pepperoni, and cheese, and it would come up with a million different entries, and you kind of got to go through and look and figure out which one to pick, right? Now, maybe they have the exact place you're eating at. Maybe you're eating at, say, McDonald's, right? And we know exactly what the macros are on all those foods at McDonald's. So you can go and you can type in McDonald's double cheeseburger, and you'll find that really it's not that bad macros wise, right? There's like 25 grams of protein, there's maybe like 13, 14 grams of carbs, and maybe like 12 or 13 grams of fat, which at the end of the day isn't terrible, right? It's fulfilling those numbers that we need to get. Now, is it a lot of food volume? No, it's a very calorically dense food. All those calories are kind of packed into a little bit. So in a couple hours, you might be hungry again, but those are kind of the trade-offs that you get to make when you decide you want to start tracking your macros. So that's the beauty of it, guys. That's the best part about tracking your macros, is that you're gonna have flexibility and options to eat whatever you want, okay? One of the most asked questions I get from people is, what food should I eat? What food should I eat? And I always say, eat whatever foods you like. Eat whatever foods you enjoy and you prefer. That's gonna help you stay on your diet the most, and when you're tracking, you know that you can have anything. For example, before I came in here to shoot this right now, I ate a whole bag of candy. Now, is that the best choice in the entire world? Probably not. Do I love candy? Absolutely yes. And so I know how many grams of carbs are in those, fat and proteins. I know how many calories are in that because it's all on the back on that nutrition label. And I just log that in MyFitnessPal, and I know, okay, so I had 60 grams of carbs out of my 300 grams of carbs for the day was allotted to candy. And it works just like that, guys. It's so cool. Once you kind of find your groove, you'll notice that you can really just enjoy any of the foods that you want. Now, when we talk about tracking, it's not easy. Tracking is a skill, just like anything else, right? And you have to get good at it. And if you've never done it before, you're not gonna be very good at it, and it's gonna be tough. It's gonna take a little bit of time. But I promise you, if you stick with it, you will get better, just like anything else, right? That's the most amazing thing about humans, is that we can literally do anything, and no matter how bad you are at it, if you do that action over and over and over again, even if you fail at it miserably every time, If you do it over and over and over, you will eventually get better. Even if it's just a tiny little bit better, you will get better. And so with tracking, at first, it's gonna take some extra time. You're gonna have to take a couple minutes before you cook your meals or after dinner to kind of sit down and okay, look and make sure you're logging the right things. Make sure that you're entering accurate entries, and that takes a little bit of time, but the payoff is huge, guys. What that's gonna do for you, more than this Fat to Fit Coach Foundations of Nutrition course is gonna teach you, looking at the foods you eat, being mindful of the foods you eat, and knowing the actual numbers of the protein, carbs, and fats of the things you put in your body is gonna educate you better than any course ever could. I promise you guys, if you track and you log for 6 months, a year, 2 years, you will be set for life when it comes to dieting. You will never again need to go, oh, I need to diet. You will always be in a perpetual state of knowing exactly what you're eating, knowing if you want to lose or if you want to gain, and know how to get there. So when we talk about tracking, even though it is tough, guys, the payoff is so huge. So stick with it, build the skill. Take that as a challenge to build a new skill, right? And one that's gonna benefit you hugely, both health-wise and in the way you look. When we talk about tracking, we have to obviously measure the foods that we're tracking, right? And now sometimes that's really easy. If you have something that has a food label, it's gonna tell you how many servings are in that, and you can kind of, it's either gonna be 1 serving or maybe 2 or 3, and you can eyeball how many you had. Or what we can do if we don't have nutrition labels is we can weigh our food, right? And you can use a food scale, and that's gonna be your most accurate. You're gonna wanna weigh in grams, just the smallest increment of measurement, and so we have the most accurate, right? So if you're weighing out, say you had a can of beans, right? And you want to weigh out, and the serving size of the can of beans says 56 grams is 1 serving, and that's 130 calories. It's 56 grams of carbs, it's 9 grams of protein, and 0 grams of fat, okay? And once we have that, we can then put that on the food scale, we measure out our 56 grams, and we log that into our MyFitnessPal, right? We just search, whatever it is, kidney beans. 56 grams, we put it in there, boom, ready to go, right? If you want a little bit more, maybe you can have more carbs for that day, and so you have 100 grams of kidney beans, right? And those are the decisions you get to make, but we need to weigh to be accurate. Now, weighing in grams can, take a long time. And again, this is one of those things that I think the trade-off is definitely worth it, but I understand how busy some of you are. I understand some of you have kids, and that maybe tracking all your food is not feasible, right? And that's okay. There's levels to this, right? There's a range in which you can go, and none of them mean failure, and none of them mean ultimate success, right? It just means the speed in which you get there. And so with that said, you can absolutely use your measuring cups to measure things, right? It's not gonna be as accurate as measuring on the food scale in grams, but it might be a little bit quicker for you. It might be a little bit easier. It might not stress you out as much. And if those things are there and those things help you to adhere to your diet, to the plan that you've kind of written for yourself, then that is better than being perfect, okay? So if we are using measuring cups, it's gonna be less accurate, right? So the most important thing when it comes to tracking, even if we're being inaccurate, even if there is error, we need to know that there will always be error, right? There's error in the food labels, there's gonna be error in your measuring, there's gonna be the couple bites or licks that you don't end up eating, or the couple bites that you eat a little bit more of. And all those things are totally okay. I don't want you guys to stress about any of these tiny little things. So we want to make sure that our error is always consistent. So what that means is if you are always logging your ground beef raw, keep logging it raw. If you switch to logging it cooked, it's going to change the numbers, right? Is one right or one wrong? No. What we want to do is be consistent in our error. So whatever one you're doing, just stick with that entry. The most important thing when we're logging is just consistency, whatever that means for you, okay? Another way we can kind of measure that's the least accurate way is gonna be just eyeballing it. And something you can do when you're eyeballing it is use your hand as a measuring guide, right? And so what we're gonna do is a fist is gonna be about the serving size of a protein. So a fist size of steak, a fist size of chicken, and that's gonna be a serving of protein. Then for carbs, it's gonna be a handful, okay? So if you can fit like a handful of pasta in your hand, a handful of rice, a handful of potatoes, that's gonna be a serving of carbs. And then a serving of fat is gonna be a thumb. So if you think like avocado, right? That's not very much. or butter or mayo, or if you add olive oil, something like a thumb is not very much, so that is going to be our fat, and how we're going to measure that is by the thumb. Now for things like veggies, we want to try to have 2 handfuls, right? And now if you're paying attention, what we just basically set up was a meal for you guys, right? We have our protein, we have our carb source, and we have our fat, and we have our vegetables, right? So we have a full meal right there, all measuring it via our hand. Now, that's going to be the least accurate way. It's going to depend, on the size of your hand, which might be different than how many calories you actually need. It's going to depend on you. Like maybe if you're really hungry one day, I think we've all done this before, gone to the grocery store hungry and gotten a ton of stuff we didn't need. Well, that same thing holds true for when you're hungry and you go to eat. You're likely to eat more or want more than you actually need because you're so hungry, right? Psychology plays a huge factor in being successful in our diet, guys. So we really want to work our way around that and hack our way through that psychology so it's not such an issue and we can just eat what we want, follow our plan, and get results, okay? That's gonna wrap up module number 4, tracking your macros. Now that we've gone through how to track your macros, you guys know to think of your macros just like your financial budget. You have your protein, your fat, and your carbs for the day. You know how to measure, whether that's on your food scale with measuring cups or via your hand just eyeballing it. And with these tools, you guys are gonna have so much flexibility when it comes to what you can eat. There's no certain foods you're gonna eat. You're gonna be able to eat what you prefer, and that's gonna ultimately help with your adherence and get you results. In module number 5, we're gonna talk about how to create habits that are gonna help hack that psychology to make it super easy to hit your daily macro budget. So stay tuned.